So my name's Jordan. Most of you guys know that. My wife is not here. She's on stage singing. So she'll be back in a little bit to sit at a table with me. But we got no slides because she takes care of it, and she's doing that. So you see my weaknesses. She covers all of them. But thanks, guys, for being here. So what we wanted to highlight was the marriage conference. Coming Friday and Saturday. If you haven't signed up, Kevin said I can give you a code. When you sign up, put in the word Wednesday, and you get it all the way down to $40 for Friday and Saturday. And just so you guys know, because we have marriage conference, there's no class next Sunday. We don't want to overdo it. We want all of you guys to go to Friday and Saturday morning, go to Sunday service. So do not show up here next Sunday. But we'll be back the next Sunday, and then we're going to be kicking off the parenting series. Kevin will be speaking at that. And then the last 2 Sundays, Daniel and Renee will be back, so they get a little break. But the one table talk we have, we're just going to do it quick, so then that way we can jump in with Gil and Dana. So go around the table, introduce each other, tell about your kids, since we're shifting to kids. I want you to brag about your kids, tell them where they go to school, or if they're babies, homeschool, and just say something amazing about your kids. Then we'll be back. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. We're going to have Gil and Dana come. Pastor Gil Stiglitz and Dana, his wife Dana, they've been married 35 years. They have 3 adult daughters and 2 grand doggies. But we're going to pray over them, pray for this class, and then we're going to give them our attention, and they're going to crush it for us. So, Heavenly Father, just thank you for this day. Thank you that we could all gather as friends on his family in Jesus Christ. I pray for Gil and Dana as they speak over us on marriage and parenting. Lord, have the words come from you. Let us be open to what they're saying and apply it in our lives. And bless all the kids in kids ministry and all the beautiful babies that are around here in class. Just protect them, bless them. And in Jesus' name, amen. All right.
All right, thank you. My name's Gil, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm excited to be talking with you and in the journey that you're in. So you have a handout that you should be able to access, and just in case I talk too fast, we just put it up there. Basically, Jordan asked me to talk about marriage, and yet if you have little kids, your marriage is dependent upon how you parent. And so if you parent well, then you have a better chance of enjoying your marriage. Unless you have perfect children, and then you can move into the marriage stuff and just say, how do we make it even better, and all that kind of thing, and that kind of thing. Now, my job at this point is to try and impress you with how wonderful my wife is. She's absolutely amazing. It's actually Dr. Dana Stiglitz. She is a nurse practitioner, has a doctorate in nursing, and works at a clinic in Sacramento, and I'm just amazed that she was willing to marry me. It is amazing that she was willing to kind of help me along in this whole process. So she's great. Anything else you want to say at the very beginning?
No, just to give the idea that I'm not a speaker. This is not my thing. I work with medical things, and so
put that up.
He's the speaker. I don't know. Obviously, because I don't know how to hold the microphone. So we don't come as a package where we're both speakers and we travel around and try to impress people with how great we are at speaking. I'm just here because I love him and I want to communicate what we've learned together to you guys.
Well, and I wanted to make sure that she carries so much wisdom, and then whenever she comes, everybody goes, oh, that was really good. And then when I'm here, everybody just, oh, that was really loud. So, I want you to be wise and that kind of stuff. So basically, we want to just talk about 3 things that I find I've been involved in ministry for 50 years, that if you want to make your marriage go well and you have little ones, or somewhere in that process of, 0 to 10, and if you have teenagers, we'll talk a little bit about that. You really have to kind of embrace. I was thinking, what would I think God would want to say to you? And I would say 3 things. And so this is what we're going to kind of talk our way through. If the first idea is, if you are going to enjoy your family and enjoy your marriage, especially during that 10 to 15 years where the little ones are coming up, you have to have a level of engagement that is not normal in our culture. Both husband and wife have to be engaged. You can't say, well, I'm delegating that to you. You are my assistant vice principal of parenting, and I will come back and check on you weekly. Both have to be fully engaged. And as we talk about that, loving and training your children has to be a both and kind of thing. It's very common, it's been very common for years for dads to kind of exit the scene, to kind of just delegate. I got my executive vice president and she's in charge of all this, and as long as I just show up and tap her and that kind of stuff. I may show up at prayer time, but that's about it. And that won't work in these days. You have to be engaged. And so the fact that you're in this class, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but you have to stay engaged, and engagement will look different. You can't say to your friend, well, how engaged do you have to be? And because he will have to be engaged at a different level. I remember some couples that would say to me, well, how come I can't be like them? Because, he's never there. And, and his wife is just like this amazing, she can plan the world, and that's not the marriage you got married into. You have to be engaged. Does that make sense? Okay? So apathy and non-engagement is the number one problem that I run into when marriages want to dissolve during child rearing. That's the solution, is engagement. So anything you want to say?
And I would just say the key is teamwork. You guys are a team. You're a family. And last night we were at church, and Ray said the thing that the pastor said to them when they got married is pray together, play together, and stay together. And the thing that we find ourselves, kind of the hallmark of our marriage that we like to share with other couples, are stay on the same side of the argument. So whatever the problem is, find a way to draw a line and say, we're a team here. Here's the problem. You're not the problem, and I'm against you, but we're together going, what are we going to do about that? So we stay as a team, and that keeps us moving towards the same goal rather than two people competing against one another to win whatever it is that we're on a team. We want the team to win.
Yeah. And how can I figure out how the line can't go this way? It's got to go this way. Even if it's us against the kids for a while. Okay, how can we control them? How can we love them enough to move them forward? So the first idea is engagement. Now, let me talk with you about the statistics, and we've thrown that out there for you, is the greatest single cause for whether children will take the right moral road is the involvement of the father in the home, both in the young child and in the teen child. If dad is engaged, it changes everything. My favorite illustration about this has nothing to do with kids. It has to do with elephants. In Africa, they took a whole group of elephants, young elephants, and they moved them to a preserve that they were trying to make a wildlife preserve. And so they transplanted them all over there, and they had, and what they discovered was all of a sudden the elephants started just going wild and crazy and ripping up trees and attacking the lady elephants. What's going on? And they found out that they had transplanted all middle school elephants over. And so they said, how do we fix it? They can't have middle school teaching cleaning. So what they did was they took the meanest, toughest, roughest bull elephant they could find, who was old and huge, and they moved him over, and he just straightened out the boys. And it straightened out the whole, and everything went back to normal elephant behavior. And so there is something about engagement there that makes a huge, huge difference. Now, one more thing there. An absentee father, either emotionally absent, distant in terms of physical distance, or through divorce, predicts teen pregnancy and gun violence in 86% of the cases. So even if you have been divorced and you have children with another, how can I stay engaged with those kids? Does that make sense? They need to have some kind of contact with you. Okay, because that makes all of the difference. Anything here, hon?
Yeah, and I think the key is to realize that your kids will go through different stages. And some of you have little tiny brand new people. Some of you have toddlers, school age, teenagers, or what have you. Each of those have different levels of engagement. And guys will find that certain things and certain time frames might be more comfortable for them. And what we found as raising girls is the really significant value of engaging with our tween daughters, finding something that they would want to do with dad, because it gets to be those years where you're like, I don't know what to do. Should I touch her? Should I hug her? She doesn't want to be affectionate with me. And I don't know what to do with her. I like to play softball, so let's play softball. Chances are they want to do whatever it is you're doing. But if there's something that they're doing that you want to engage in, whether it's watching a movie and learning about what the point of the movie is, or going out and kicking a soccer ball, you have something that you do with them that's very special. We had 3 girls, so Gil got to do this with 3 different people with 3 different personalities. And dating, you know, that's a big thing, is you just with one of those kids go out and do something special, take that girl out, do whatever it is, but it's not all of them at the same time always, that they have special time with you.
Yeah, I would end up taking each of the girls on a date every week. That would be, okay, and I'd say this is a $10 date. So we can go get ice cream, we can go get a Barbie, we can go do this, but we can't do it all, okay? And just to spend time with them doing different things, you want to have them work that through. Now, let me just, this can help the guys, and I don't mean to be ragging on the guys because I am a guy, but let me just say, it helped me to realize that in order to be present with my kids, that meant at least an hour a day engaged with the girls. That's a minimum, okay? It's not a maximum. It's the floor. It's not the ceiling, okay? So, and many times, sometimes that was, sometimes you work with homework, sometimes you do different kinds of things, but something about the presence of dad engaged with your little ones, you know. And I remember my dad, every night, if it wasn't raining, we were throwing the ball across the street back, and even when he had bursitis, he just switched arms, and he just, there's something about dad's presence. Now, it's not that mom's presence is not huge, it's incredible, it's just dad adds something that sometimes in our culture says it's okay to not be there, and it's not. So anyway, let's go on. You guys look like, can we move on? Okay, let's go. Now, this is another statistic that I got from Family Research Council. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaways are from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists motivated by displaced anger comes from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 75% of all adolescent patients in drug abuse centers come from fatherless homes. 85% of all youths sitting in prisons grew up in a fatherless home. I go in every month to Folsom Prison, and I work with the inmates, and if I were to ask them, how many of you grew up in a fatherless home, it's 90+%. It's 90+%. So engage. I've even seen, if you're, this is just odd, but I'll say this, we have a number of teenagers in this middle school time where they're struggling because of the culture with their identity. The fix in almost every case is an hour a day with dad. It just adjusts it. And I've seen it actually change them from where they were going to, hey, my dad's hanging out with me. I don't have that problem anymore. It is fascinating to me. It's just fascinating. So, but that's a whole nother discussion that we can have if you want to do that. Now, the second thing that I would tell you that's the most important thing if you're going to have an enjoyable family is have a staff meeting every week. Now, you wouldn't call it, some people call it a team meeting, some people call it let's get together. Now, the reason why you want to have a staff meeting is if you don't have a staff meeting, your date will become a staff meeting. Does that make sense? And now, to sit down, we used to do it on Saturdays at 1 o'clock. You know, when the kids were little, they were in, napping or whatever else. And when they were a little bit older, they were out playing or whatever else. We would go for an hour to an hour and a half to walk through what are we going to do to survive next week? How are we going to move through this? What's your thoughts? What's my thoughts? Does that make sense? You understand that idea? We have been in the process of doing a lot of premarital counseling for the staff people who find each other, oh, you're at Bayside, I'm at Bayside, let's get married. And we do a lot of that premarital. It's wonderful. And we have found to them, they've all said, because we have this book on building a ridiculously great marriage, on just how to go from good to great. One of the keys is to have a staff meeting, and what a staff meeting's all about, and what are the details of the staff meeting, and the couples just say, as long as we do the staff meeting, it works. If we don't do the staff meeting, and the guys will tell me, oh, it doesn't work really well, because there's not enough communication. So am I making sense there with this? Okay. Comments here, hon?
Yeah, I'd say the staff meeting is something that's important, whether you have little kids, whether your kids are grown. It's your time to communicate about what your team is doing. And I remember this young couple, they were getting married and they had very romantic relationship, very spontaneous, a lot of fun, and he's creative and wants to make her feel special. And, she was talking to us and said, hey, what about doing a staff meeting? And he said, oh, no. That will take away the fun and the spontaneity in our relationship. I won't be able to just be creative. It'll just seem very planned and rote, and it'll take that away. And really trying to encourage them to say, no, this is where you create a place where your dates are really fun, instead of going, okay, we don't have enough money in the checkbook for this. Not checkbook, nobody uses that. We don't have enough money in our budget for this. And we're talking about it while we're looking at each other, over some beautiful romantic view. And so it's a place where you create that, and it allows you to talk about all the different things of the week that maybe you missed later, whether it's kids saying, this is what happened at school and we need to really go at this, or this is where our budget is, or I forgot to tell you I have 6 different meetings this next week and I won't be home. All the different things where you come together and you talk about just what keeps you on the same page and keeps you a team and keeps your date romantic and not crossing over all the time.
A number of times my wife has asked me, would you stop trying to make me read your mind? Just tell me. Let's talk our way through this. And so that's just a way. I don't know of any of you who are in business who do not have a staff meeting to talk about how do we make sure we're all on the same page. The most important business you're in is your family. The Stiglitz family for us is my most important business. And so we need to then have that staff meeting. Now, let me tell you how we did our staff meeting and what we were trying to aim at. If we could ask, what do you not want your kids to turn out like, this would be the list from us, okay? Now, if you look at this, okay, what do you not want your kids to be like as an adult? Because we actually know people who were once seemingly wonderful parents who raised that. And I went, we don't want that. How do we not get that? How do we not get drug addicts? How do we not get people who hate us? How do we not get that? So you look at, I don't want them to be antisocial. I don't want them to be socially awkward. I don't want them to be alone. I don't want them to be with the wrong crowd. I don't want them to be irresponsible and lazy or criminal. I don't want to have my visiting opportunity with my kids to be at Folsom Prison, okay? And scheming, addicted. Now, how many of you also don't want some of those things? Okay, a few of you. Okay, the rest of you, I'm fine with that. That's good. Okay, now, okay, so I got to wake you up. I got to pull. I got to have a response. Okay, then I don't want them to be impulsive or angry or uncontrolled or vindictive, which I grew up like, okay? And you have to, I don't want them to be disrespectful, rebellious, chaotic, selfish. I don't want the school to call me, well, your son is the bully. Your daughter is the bully. Like, I don't want them to be under-resourced, poor, unwise, emotionally fragile, uneducated, or naive. So what we did, because I pastored a church for 17 years, and I watched really good parents raise that. And I said, what's the antidote? What's biblically the antidote? And so these are the 6 R's that we came up with. In other words, every week, we sat down and said, how's the relationship with us to them, with us to each other, with us to child 1, with us to child 2. Does that make sense? Because the level of your relationship, do they think you love them? Do you know how many kids think you hate them because all they hear from you is no? Stop that. Don't do that. So the first thing is, do they feel that we love them? And there were times when she would say, Gil, I think that they don't know that you love them. You're just being a little bit too hard-nosed. Does that make sense? And so that's where we'd have another date, or we'd have to have interactions. And then what do you think is the solution for that? Then we go right down. Responsible. When your kids get above 5 years of age through 15, you're trying to teach them responsibility. Before that, if they pick up their toys, and they put the poop in the potty, whoa, it's a party, okay? And we've all done that. It's been very good. But really, how do you teach responsibility? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the whole point, you have an enjoyable family. When your family is enjoyable, it's like the kids are semi-obedient, and they're kind of living within our system. And isn't this fun? You do not want to endure parenting. You want to enjoy it. And you can't do that unless you start working specifically. Now, let me just say, this is my, I think, humble but accurate opinion. God made you the experts on your children because he put the two of you together and you both have interesting things. There were times when I would say, I don't know how to fix this, and she would say, well, I think we ought to try this. Or sometimes both of us would have opinions, and she'd say, we'll go with yours for the first time, and then when it fails, we'll go with it. Does that make sense? And you just kind of walk your way through that. And then the whole process of routines, routines are absolutely huge. Your kids will enjoy your family if you teach them routines and you do things the same way each time. We used to, any comments here on this? Not yet. Okay, she's got stuff she's saving, so this is good. Okay. What we tended to do was, and your kids are probably much better behaved than ours, but before we would go into a store or before we would go to dinner with Grandma and Grandpa, we would have a little huddle to say, now, we're about to go in the store. And this trip is a looking trip. This is not a getting trip. This is not a buying trip. So we're going to put our hands behind our backs. We're going to go into the store and we're going to look, oh, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Oh, that's lovely. But we're not going to reach out and touch it. And so I will be in front and I will put my hands behind my back and then Mom will be at the back and all of us like a bunch of little ducklings will walk through the store. And so the store owners were going, I really love it. I don't know what it is, but I think I like it. We would go, oh, look at that. And so we would tell them what we expected. Or Grandma and Grandpa are going to come, and they're going to tell the same stories that they've always told. And it's going to last for too long. You are allowed to go to the bathroom twice, but not together. And, and you can ask us. We will have coloring books, and so we would go through every part of the time. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, in 5 minutes, can we go to the bathroom? Can we go together? And then the bathroom is a mess. And you have to figure, or like, we are about to have dinner. And dinner is a wonderful time. And we're going to need you, before we get started, you're going to do the forks, and you're going to do the plates. And you're gonna, have you ever said to your kids, you should know this? The fact that you say that to yourself means they don't. And you need to then go over it again. I mean, I've been here 8 years. And every Sunday morning, we have a huddle. What are we doing today? We are greeting people. We are kind. They're paying us to be kind, and they still have to tell us that. They just have to, here's what we're doing, here's what we're... And if you're going to get past you should be old enough to know this, and just realize they don't. Let's have a huddle. Let's have a little huddle right before we go to church, right before we go to see Grandma, right before we go to school, right? Hey, we're about to go to bed. Let's get ready. Here's what we're going to expect you to do. You can only come out for water twice, okay? And eventually, we finally had to, I used to have to stand and hold the door. And my daughter, I know you're out there, Dad. And because she's pulling on the door. I need water. You've had water. You're about to explode with water. And you just have to walk them through and you just have to say, this is what we expect, because they're trying to figure out what they want, and you are the warden. You are the warden. So they feel if they can beat you, they have won. And they have nothing better to think about all day but beating you. And so that's why you go over it again. And you think, when does it get easier? It gets easier when they get the routine. We always do this, then we always brush our teeth, then we always floss, or whatever the order is for you guys. And then we get in our jammies, and then we have prayer, and then you make it the same, and you make it the same, and then you say, we're going to do this. And then when they all know what to do, then you don't have to have the huddle. You could just do it. But every once in a while, one of them will say, I don't want to do that. Oh, it's time for a huddle again. Isn't this exciting? We get to train again. And you will train more than you ever wanted to. Let me just keep going. I'll get in. Respect. They have to respect you, and you have to respect them. Does that make sense? And you have to teach them how to respect others. We made a rule in the respect category that every person who was over 13 got a Miss or a Mister in front of it, because we wanted them to know the difference between someone who's your buddy and someone who's your nanny, someone who's your babysitter. And so it was Miss Kathy, Miss Karen, whatever else, or the teacher was Miss this, because it makes a huge difference. Because if they can call them by their first name, we're equal. and that means I don't have to do what you're saying. So that was a whole rule that we put a lot of that stuff in the book. But then resources, there's always resources to talk about, and we can talk a little bit more about. That's a whole nother discussion. But okay, look at that.
I'll say one thing really quick while you're switching, is I think this is such a great list because you look at these qualities and you say to yourself, these are the things that I don't want my kids to be, right? I don't want them to be antisocial. I don't want whatever this thing is that you're noticing, find it in there and go, okay, so if they're doing that, this is what I do to help with that. I think it's just so key to know what you're looking for and have a solution for it. And I'll just plug this book. Nobody wrote it, but Gil recommended a book to me called The Gap and the Gain. It's a business leader book. And it's been a game changer for me. And one of the things that they talked about was if you have a goal of doing X or succeeding in Y, then what you have in front of you when you make a choice, is that going to get you there? So if I want to be able to be a marathon runner, I'm not going to get there by looking at a marathon on TV and going, cool, that's really great. I'm going to have to set a plan. I'm going to have to say no to certain things. I'm going to have to get more sleep and eat better, whatever it is. And I think with our kids, we have to be able to say, what is it that we're looking for? And if I'm yelling at them and telling them they're doing it wrong for the 15th time, there's a problem here. So what are we going to do so that I'm not doing that and we're creating a space where we can be successful in making these kids all that they're able to be?
No, this is good. This is actually the way we did staff meeting every week for 25 years when our kids were at home. Her and I just had this plan, and we would just go, okay, relationship, how are we doing? How's the relationship with child 1, which in our case it was Janessa? How is the relationship at child 2? It was Abby. How is the relationship with Grace? And Grace is the youngest, so she's just watching the older two get in trouble, and so she's very relational, and she figures it out. But, and so we had these discussions. Then respect, are they being respectful? No, this one's being sassy. When you have teenagers, almost all your discipline is about their attitude. But our oldest one, that started very young. I can remember when we would say, oh, honey, you seem to have misplaced your happy attitude, your happy spirit. I think it's in the bedroom. You left it under the bed. Go back in there, and you can come out when you find it. But this little attitude that you have, we can't have this out here. And so sometimes I'd have to go in there and help her try and find it under the bed or in the closet. And we got to find it. We got to put it on because you're making a choice to be a pissy little girl. Stop that. Okay, don't do that. And you can choose to not be that. And so I want you to go in there, make a choice, find it, put it on. Oh, I'm happy to be here in the family. Does this make sense? Because if you allow that without figuring out how to help them, then and you're just, okay, what will work? What will work? Okay, now then rules, routines, and we just would talk back and forth. Now, usually when I talk to a group that has little kids, what everybody wants is, could you give me actual things that work? Could you give me practical things? And so when I was putting this together, I want to talk for an hour and a half on every one of those, but I found it to be the most helpful. How do I correct my children? How do I train my children? And so there are only two ways to train your children biblically and psychologically. There's only two ways. And so if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail, okay? So the third thing that I would say is train up your children. And you have to get excited. I get to train you again. I remember one time, I think they were like 8 and 10, the oldest two, and they got out of the car, and they just fought each other all the way to the door in the garage, and then threw open the door, and then they fought each other who was going to go through first, and it was like a mess. And I went, oh, girls, this is so exciting. Come back, because you're not treating the door well. The door, that's not how you treat the door. Come back. There's a training opportunity here. And so So I got him back to the car, and I said, now, here's how let's walk. I told him, this is what I expect. I want you to walk together, and then, oh, you go through first. Oh, you go through. And so we trained it, and I said, now I want you to do it. So then one of them opened the door for the other. I said, that's wonderful. Come back. Let's do that 5 more times. The greatest discipline I did for them when they were in elementary school through teenage years was to have them do it 5 times right. That was far more than any other, because it was like, and I've talked to a number of couples here, and they'll go, In fact, they will introduce me to their kids. Sandy, this is the man who taught us to make you go up the stairs 5 and 10 times until you get it right. And the kids looking at me like, thanks a lot. But it's like, instead of getting mad, that them not doing it right tells you they don't know. Because you should say, you should know how to do this. That doesn't teach them anything. And we all want to say that. Or have you ever said to yourself or said to them, if you do that again, I'm stopping this car? The fact that you said it, it means stop the car and train them. And don't be upset at them. Just go, I've discovered you need some more training. Isn't this exciting? We have a friend of ours who really taught some really great lessons to us. She never left to go to something except for a half an hour to an hour before, so that there was time for training when the kids would fuss or, because if you go late, I don't have time for this and we got to get there. Ah! Does that make sense?
Yeah, she would always have their shoes all lined up because she had 4 kids to try to get out the door. And if they needed to be somewhere at 4 and they needed to leave a half an hour early, so at 3:30, everybody's getting ready. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? Well, it takes a lot of time to get 4 kids to get their shoes on, to get them out the door. I have to go to the bathroom. I forgot this. I go over here. So she planned everything well. And the whole thing about stopping the car, I'll never forget. I was in the car with her kids in their van. And her 2 little boys were fighting in the back. And they were fighting and fighting and fighting. And she said, if you don't stop right now, I'm going to pull this car over. You're going to get out and I'm going to leave you here. And they kept fighting. And she pulled over. They got out of the car. They sat on the curb, and she drove away and went around the block and came back and found them there. And they never did that again. I mean, I'm sure they did other things, but I just thought,
not recommended.
She meant what she said.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say as you're going up through here, and we're all very familiar with train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. In Ephesians 6:1, it says, children, obey your parents, and this is in the Lord, and this is right, and it'll go well with you, and you'll live long on the earth. And I think the one thing that's really cool about it is it gives a promise. All the commandments that we might be familiar with, don't commit adultery, or, honor God more than all the other gods, or whatever it is that, people are used to hearing about commandments. This is what your kids can take ownership of. This is my commandment. This is me as a kid. And I remember I became a Christian when I was, probably about 14, and my parents told me this was my commandment to focus on. And so my job was to obey my parents. My job wasn't to second guess anything that they were doing. My job was to trust God, to work through my parents and say, okay, I get to obey. That's my job, and that's my responsibility, and to take ownership of it. And that's good for parents, but the kids get their own commandment with Ephesians 6:1.
Yeah. Let me just say, she had said, I'm going to go back just a little bit. Just this last week, I have been so grateful as I look at the gap and the gain. My kids aren't perfect, but the Lord just said, look at what they're doing, and they're all they're everything we planned, everything we prayed about, everything and I just went, it worked! It actually worked! We have kids who are not all those other things, and they are the things that we wanted. Now, could I think of 17 new things that I wish they were? Yes, and we pray about those, but we live in the wonder of God's plan worked. Does that make sense? Now, let's talk about more specifically, how do you train responsibility? There are only 2 ways to train children to be responsible, and that is action and words. The Bible says the rod and the reproof give wisdom. Now, understand, some people have taken that so radically literally that they think that you have to use a rod every time and or you have to rebuke your children. But the idea that Solomon is saying here, in my humble but accurate opinion, in my hope, is he's saying you only have 2 ways to train your children, with words and with actions, parental action, okay? Now, some of our kids, they listened as soon as you said this. One of our children, if you just looked at her, she'd say, I'm so sorry, I'll do whatever you want me to do. The other 2 they would draw a line and they would say, make me. We had 2 strong-willed. One was a right-in-your-face strong-willed and just say, you can't make me. And I, as a strong, I just said, I love this. This is so good. I will make you. And it was like, and whoever is that person, if you have a strong-willed one, you got to have somebody like that who can just rise up and say, it's on. Isn't this fun? And you just got to go there. Because the other one's going, Okay, and the second one was sneaky. She was strong-willed that she would say, "You won't know that I'm really not doing what you're saying," and so you had to work with all that. And so now, if you understand, these are the only two options you have. Now, here's what you have. We had to say, okay, she's doing this. What are we going to do? And we had to agree on this is what we're going to do. Okay? Now, let me go through the ones I've found and discovered from both the literature, whatever else, on these areas. Okay? So let's walk this through. Because if you're going to use words, then resetting expectation is probably the easiest. That's where you say, let's have a little huddle before we go into the store, before we go to school. Now, here's what I want you to do. And you just go over it again and again and again. How many times will you have to go over it? More than once. Thousands of times until they leave the home, and then you will get a call from the college to go over it again. Okay? Does that make sense? So, but that's, now, for many of, and we did this, it was just wonderful, and you can just be excited. I get to train again. This is so exciting. Okay? Then number 2, go over the routine again and again, and make them do it. You make them do it. Then verbal repetition, sometimes I would say, now tell me what you think I want you to have done in this last situation. Because usually, you only have this discussion after they've screwed up. Does that make sense? So you sit down and you say, okay, let's just have a discussion. What do you think I wanted you to do in this? I don't know. Well, think about what you think I might want. Because now, what happens if they messed up? You know they forgot a piece, or they just, they had a vapor lock and they just did their own thing. So you want to go over it, and sometimes it's very helpful for them to tell you what it was. Now, that usually starts somewhere around 6, 7, 8. At 2 years of age, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. Okay. And then verbal praise, tell them what they did right. The psychological literature and what we found to be true is that your kids need 5 you did goods to every you did bads. So you have to invent the goods because there's not that many. Does that make sense? So if I saw my kids sitting like this, okay, on the couch, I would be walking by, and this guy taught me this, was just great, and I would say, did you see what's happening here? And they would go, no, Dad, what? I said, you are sitting and not punching each other. This is so good. Great job. And I just go on. Because what you want is you want your kids to have the sense that my parents see things that I didn't even know I was doing good, and they're praising me for it. And they'll say, you walked down the hallway and you didn't give your sister an ugly look. Way to go. Because if you're not careful, you're like me. We got more to correct. We got to get onto this. I don't have enough time. They need you to find 5 good things for every 1 bad thing. And so, am I making sense here? Okay, so just jump in with the wisdom if you want to. Then written praise, sometimes it's very meaningful and very helpful to write a note to them. If they can read it, that's very, very helpful. It could be tangible praise, a gift, a trophy. All of us do a version of this in potty training. You put the pee-pee in the potty, you get a prize. Or you get this, or you get mommy and daddy. You have never yelled so much over poop and pee in your life as when you're potty training. And it's all praise. Understand, the same holds true. We found it to be true when they were learning their multiplication tables. They'd get some M&Ms, or they would get this other thing, or whatever else. And anytime they're doing something new that they haven't done, like they have to learn a vocabulary thing or whatever else, then you praise them maybe with a tangible thing. You get a prize, or you get a this. And then you don't do it all the time, but you just do it so that they go, oh, this is really fun. I got a prize. And you don't always have it be candy. It could be a trip, a little remote control car, a little something. Does that make sense? But it's very helpful when they're going, I don't think I can learn the multiplication tables, Dad. I can't do it. It's just too tough. So let's get a prize involved. Let's get something where they get that kind of thing.
I'm going to just pop in here.
Go for it.
I think sometimes it's really helpful to remind them of their successes, of what they've done well in the midst of learning their multiplication. Okay, wait a minute. Look at this. Let's do your addition tables. Let's see where you've succeeded. You've done this before. This is going to be hard. We'll do it together. And then you can look back and see that you succeeded, and then they can really rejoice in their successes. And I think there was one thing you said back here about talking about punishment or what do we do with the bad outcomes, and we talk about it and we stay on the same page. Sometimes I have opinions, Gil has opinions, and we may not meet and come up with the same idea. Sometimes with the decision about what we're going to do about something might come after several conversations until we come to an agreement. And it's so easy to want to act in the emotion of the moment and just go, we're going to do this. And it really helps to be on the same page, because then your kids get from you the teamwork that it's going to make them feel like you're on the same page. And the whole positive thing, that has been huge. And our girls had the chance to go to a Christian elementary and high school where they were all about affirmation. And everything that they did, they were affirmed. And so they wanted to succeed. And that's how we parented. And it got really interesting when they got into college and things weren't as affirming. But that's how life is. But it's such a great lesson to teach them about the value of affirming other people and letting other people realize that you're really happy with them. And people tend to lean in towards where they feel like they're appreciated.
So no, when we would go over the staff meeting, what are we going to do with this kid because she's really sassy right now, or this one's not picking up her toys? Then I would say, here's what I think we ought to do. And then she would say, this is what I would. And so we would then decide. Now, I would forget. So I would just launch into so what she lovingly did was she wrote down, Janessa, when she does this, gets this, and put it on the refrigerator, the bathroom mirror, and the things so that I could go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, instead of what I want to do. Does that make sense? So if we've agreed that's what we're going to do, then that's what we both do, rather than I just launch into yelling or I launch into whatever. Does this make sense? So that and so I would have to go, that was not good. Let me go check what I'm supposed to do. And so you have to work with this, okay, so that it works together, okay?
One more tiny little thing, setting the expectation for your kids of what they know is going to happen in a situation, whether it's going to the store and saying we're not buying a thing here, setting the expectation, this is what we want to see you do, this is what it looks like, this is what's going to happen if you don't do it, and then they're responsible for whatever it is, the choices that they make, and that's huge, because then they know they didn't just mess up and we're yelling at them. They knew that they didn't meet the expectation or what was asked of them.
Yes. Now, if you look over at number 10, the 5 questions, this comes from William Glasser's book, Positive Addiction, which is a wonderful book. It's an ancient book now, written in the 70s, but many of you don't even remember. You weren't even around, but I was around in the 70s. Okay, basically, when your girls turn about 7, when boys, it's about 9. Okay, it's a